Here's today's pile. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 1 of Book Review. So let's see what we're grabbing from the pile today. We got some sun coming in here, but today we're grabbing from my coursework literature pile of 2 novels, and we're going to talk about this book here. Now, this is an easy one for me to start with because it's one of the 2 books I've been reading in my English literature class. I just posted an essay about it today, so I have probably some good writing or good things I've already written to say about this. But before I start talking about this book, first, and today's Pokemon is Skiploom. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, we're talking about Girl Meets Boy by Ali Smith. So I'll give a little quick overview, then we'll get into some bullet points, and then I might have some light spoiler discussion. And then we'll give it a rating. So let's see how this goes. Girl Meets Boy, I think when you hear it, it kind of sounds very generic, like a generic romance. But when you read the book, or if you read the book, you figure out that it's not about typical girl meets boy thing. It's about the meeting of feminine and masculine. The story takes place in Inverness, a North Scottish city, where there's 2 siblings who are very similar. The story starts when they're both young and they're talking to their grandparents who have a atypical relationship, and their grandfather seems to have some sort of gender fluidity, or seems to toy around or play around with the idea of gender or slash sex. There's a playfulness in the writing, and also there's a distinct lack of punctuation. When people speak in this book, Ali Smith uses a writing style where instead of having like the quotation marks and then this person said this, I yelled Anthea, instead it will just have a normal line and then a comma, and then I say. So it is written with no dialogue, but the writing itself describes the dialogue or says the dialogue, but it doesn't quote it as typically it is. And at first this might seem a little bit weird, but actually I quite like it, and it leads to a much cleaner presentation. So the grandfather has this playfulness when it comes to gender and this non-conformity, which is a big theme. And then the rest of the book takes place when these 2 girls are adults. And the chapters are named after the perspective, which it is. So it's like I, you, them, us, all together now, stuff like that. It keeps changing perspective, which makes it interesting. It will take a while to go through the book play by play, and I want these reviews to be a bit quicker. Both of the girls are working at this big company conglomerate called Pure, where they're trying to commoditize bottled water and try and sell it. And basically, they want their brand to be pervasive, and for some reason they're working in this northern city of Scotland because they have this clean water, and they can use that area. So they have like a location there, they can use that area to try and brand this Scottish pure water to sell water. And so it has the idea of taking the natural, commercializing it, and making something corporate and typical, or what's normal in the modern era, trying to make things normal, trying to make unnatural things normal, like paying for bottled water. Well, we changed perspective, but the main character, I would say, is Anthea, and then the other sister is called Imogen. And Imogen is more corporate and more professional, while Anthea also has gotten this job through her sister at Pure, the company. She doesn't really feel too into it, and she doesn't like the idea of trying to sell bottled water to people. And Anthea then bumps into someone that both the sisters knew from in school, a lady named Robin, and Anthea falls in love with Robin. So there's 2 women who fall in love together and have a homosexual relationship. And that's kind of a lot of what this book is about love. I've been wanting to read a good romance novel, and this is less about the romance and more about love and what is natural, what is nature, and then themes of anti-corporation, and also there's a big weight on the natural things, and and natural imagery and metaphor and beauty, because the main antagonistic force is corporation, artificial normality that we see in the modern era, like a perversion of nature, being like bottling water and selling it to people, making that the normal thing, which is pretty crazy. And I find it strange that I think that is a normal thing in some places, even if they do have clean water. I know there are some places where the water is more questionable, due to sometimes intentional pollution. Haha. North American native reserves, how about that? Water fracking and such. So it is sort of addressing those sort of themes. This book kind of addresses injustice in terms of feminism and also in terms of like general society. And the way that we see that in Boy Meets Girl is this book is a retelling of the myth of Iphis, which is a myth about how a girl and a girl fall in love, and then for the wedding, there's a lot of pressure for them to be normal and for it to be an easy wedding without riling people up or being confusing. And so Iphis, one of the two girls who have fallen in love, gets magically transformed by one of the Greek gods to be a literal male, from female to male, so that the wedding can go smoothly. Anthea's partner Robin talks about this. This myth is important to them, and they want to break out of that retelling of the myth that this story is. They don't want to have to conform to the pressures that change Iphis into a man. Yet, girl still meets boy, and Anthea and other characters turn around to this idea once, like Imogen, Anthea's sister, also kind of has a revelation, which I won't talk about right now. Some characters are very judgmental, and some characters look down upon or characterize the pushback of homosexuality that there was in the UK and in Scotland in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. This was published in 2007, I should have said that. Many characters come to the realization that there is beauty in sort of a mixture of both masculine and feminine. And I really connected with this because masculinity and femininity are kind of confusing, because is femininity defined by whatever a female does or whatever a woman does, or is it a set amount of things? And so when a female or a woman is doing something that isn't feminine and is masculine, does that just mean that they're choosing to be masculine, or does that mean that what they are doing must inherently be feminine, even if it's typically seen as masculine because they're a woman? It's kind of confusing to me. And for me, in some ways, we define ourselves, and we shouldn't strictly say this is what's masculine, this is what feminine is. But if we do decide to have that interpretation of things, then people can have traits from either side, and they can be a combination of both. And if we do decide that femininity is this and masculinity is this, and then we can have Girl Meets Boy, where people, and many people, will be a beautiful blend of both. Anthea describes her partner Robin as being perfectly boyish and perfectly girlish at the same time. And this is interesting because it doesn't quite focus exactly on the fact that they're homosexual, or the fact that they are not heterosexual. It focuses on the love and the passion that they have between each other. And they make connections and reflections between their own feelings and emotions, and they use imagery from nature. Anthea has quite a few poetic monologues that she goes on, which is my favorite part of the book. They're so beautiful, and it really shows a passion for nature and a disdain against the artificial constructs that we have, which is represented by the company that they are working for, Pure, which wants to, again, commoditize water, what should be, and what they argue is a basic human right. And this leads to sort of rebelliousness, and like there's a climax in the end when they throw up some statistics and stuff. I don't quite like that as much because I suppose you could question some of the statistics, and it does come across as not so subtle there, but I think it's about getting a message across, an inherently very feminist message, and I'm all right with that. I'm good with the message. It's just when it got to that part of the book it was lacking the things I love most about the middle section of the book, where like all the beautiful poetry and the monologues and the natural imagery. It was beautiful, and I feel like with the climax of the book, it didn't have that as much, although the characters were still kind of being developed. So the writing style's interesting, and I quite like it. We see a lot of different perspectives, which is great, and we see characters turning around mostly towards this idea of breaking out of conformity and being their own person, being rebellious, and seeing the beauty in the mixture of masculine and feminine traits as we see them traditionally or stereotypically. But in truth, people are who they are. There's a homosexual couple which appreciate and see girl meets boy as beautiful, and there's a heterosexual couple that enjoy and also appreciate the beauty and the attractiveness of someone who has both masculine and feminine traits, but still sees themselves as they are. And in both of those relationships, there's not really that many themes of like transgenderness or transitioning. It's more so that they see these feminine and masculine traits in themselves, and they don't want to give up who they are just because some people see a woman having masculine traits. They still just want to be themselves. They don't want to conform to the what happened in the myth of Iphis, where Iphis was forced to change from a female to a male. And yet it does not condone that sort of transition either. It's about the only thing they really say about that is Robin feels bad that Iphis that had to happen for Iphis to have a nice wedding, which is the big shame. It's about being yourself and not being forced to be someone else. And also, under that light, there's a lot of connection with nature. This is a book I have a lot to say about, and I felt like I actually touched on a lot of points from my essay. Okay, I will just read you one of my favorite bits from this, and this is when Anthea and Robin are having an intimate moment together, and this is Anthea's poetic monologue about what she feels in this love making. Pardon the fan, by the way. I'm having a bit of trouble speaking today. I apologize. I was a tree whose branches were all budded knots. And what were those felty buds? Were they antlers? Were antlers really growing out of both of us? Was my whole front furring over? And were we the same pelt? Were our hands black shining hoofs? Were we kicking? Were we bitten? Were our heads locked into each other to the death, till we broke open? I was a she, was a he, was a we, were a girl and a boy and a boy. We were blades, were a knife that could cut through myth, were two knives thrown by a magician, were arrows fired by a god. We hit heart, we hit home, we were the trail of the fish that were the reek of the cat, were the beak of the bird, were the feather that mastered gravity, were high above every landscape, then down deep in the purple haze of the heather, were roaming in a gloaming in a brash unending Scottish piece of perfect jiggling, reeling, real. Can we really keep this up? This fast, this high, this happy, round again. Another notch. Hilch! The perfect jigsaw fit of one into the curve of another, as if the hill on top of the sky was that a thistle. Was I nothing but grass, a patch of coarse grass? Isn't that so fun and beautiful and rambling and lovely? Yeah, so you saw the bit there where they were like saying, I was a she, was a he, we're a girl, we're a boy, that we were blades, a knife that could cut through myth. And so they're talking about together sharpening and honing each other to cut through tradition or like the cyclical nature of myths, so that a lesbian couple wouldn't have to conform to pressures, change into someone who they're not. Like in the myth of Iphis, where Iphis didn't really want to be a man, they just wanted to love and marry their partner. But they had to be turned into a man to do that, and to make the wedding guests happy, to make the readers happy, for the writer to have a nice love story that was clean and neat and tidy. And they're talking there about them together being perfectly boyish and girlish and both being blades to cut through that myth. That's what I love about this book so much, and it's hard to say who's my favorite character, who's my least favorite character. I think the writing itself is the most characterful thing, but I suppose it would be Anthea, because that's Anthea's monologue. My least favorite character, I don't know. Dom and Norm are pretty awful, but they're also pretty good representations of some people you will find in British pubs. So there's that. They represent the ugly side of the norm and the dominant narrative, the artificial constructs. So yes, this is as much a love story as it is a love story to nature, as it is a love story to rebelling against conformity and societal pressures and corporate greed. So this is pretty good. Again, there are parts of the book which drop a little bit, and I really wish a lot more of it had this beautiful imagery and playfulness. Sometimes it is kind of very front forward, especially as kind of the awkward way it does its dialogue, or the unique way it does its dialogue. But yeah, otherwise, I really like this book, and I think I actually managed to talk about it pretty well with whilst avoiding spoilers. So I feel like I talked enough about it. Maybe there's some mild stuff there, but I don't think I really ruined anything. If you've watched this, please read it if you want, if that sounds interesting to you. And so I think that was a pretty good, very, very light spoiler discussion. So much so I have not given a warning. Because it's a book review, and I didn't really go into like really spoiler territory. So what do I give this book? How do I rate this book? I'm doing a scale out of 7. That works best for me in my mind. 10's too much, 5 is too little. I was thinking about giving this book a 4 or a 5 out of 7, but honestly, I love the imagery of nature and just how fun the writing can get, and I love the nature imagery. It's definitely a 5, maybe even a 6, but that is a very strong start. I do think that this book is very limited in many ways. The print is pretty sparse, so the story is not too much. It's very digestible, it's a little smaller, and there are parts of it that kind of drag a little bit. There's parts of it that don't have that exciting, whimsical writing style. And you may not like the writing style, but I quite liked it because, again, it was kind of non-conformative. So it fit with all the themes, but I think I'm not going to give it that 6, but I am going to give it a very strong 5 out of 7. So this is a great start. I do fully recommend this book if those themes sound interesting to you. If you're not sort of that person who is interested in that, or maybe I would kind of still suggest for you to read it, because I think it approaches it in a very gentle way. I feel like a lot of the topics it covers are very politicalized, and it does deal with politics and advocacy, especially in the climax, which and I don't feel like the climax was actually done too well, actually. But everything else I feel like was done much better with more subtlety, and it also showed different perspectives from different people. But it does show the norm and the dominant ideas. It kind of shows more the ugly side. I'm not saying that that is that the normal and the dominant narrative is ugly. There's definitely a lot of ugly to it, but it does kind of address the ugly side, and it does address people who are confused, and it addresses people who are rebellious and go against the norm. So I feel like it's pretty good, and if you are unsure or questioning those sorts of ideas or themes, I think it's a really nice, sweet book to pick up. It doesn't like talk down to you or try and like convince you to think its way. It is just kind of pretty nice and fun and beautiful. So yeah, strong 5 out of 7. And I hope as I continue these book reviews, I can get a little bit more condensed. I'm condensed. I'm actually finding it surprising how much I'm struggling to film this, just to get my words out. I think maybe I might be a little bit tired. But yeah, this is a great book to start with. I'm happy this is episode 1. So thank you so much for joining me. And this is probably going to be a longer episode. I'm going to try and keep them around 10 minutes in the future. What am I going to be reading next? So this book is going up on the shelf. I put it on the top shelf because it's pretty good. What I'm reading through now is the Power of Five series by Anthony Horowitz. And I've already read the first 3, and so I'm on the 4th one, Necropolis. There's 5 books, just finishing up the 4th one here. So I'll be doing reviews for the first 3 and the 4th one, and hopefully soon I'll get my hands on the 5th one too. I'll have to be borrowing that from the library. So I am adding another book, but I really want to finish off this series. The series means a lot to me. So I'm enjoying this a lot. If you want to follow along and you see this video when it comes out, try and pick these up, see if they're in your local library. If not, I'm just going to give a little hint. I really like these, so whenever you're watching this, maybe check these out. But if you are watching this in the future, even in probably a few weeks, the reviews for these books should be out, so check those out. There'll be a playlist linked in the description. Obviously, if you're seeing this as it releases, this is the first episode. I did do an episode 0 where I kind of explained the series, so I'm not going to do any of that today. Thank you so much for joining me. Pulled out our first 5 out of 7. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. I don't know if I think I'm pretty low on the screen. Yeah, so the main is femininity. I can't say it very well, I'm sorry. Is femininity. I can't say it very well, I'm sorry.